Welcome to Whispers of the Night. I'm so glad you're here, settling into this quiet moment with me. Tonight, allow the world to soften as we step together into a gentle story, one meant to be listened to slowly, like breathing in and out beneath a calm sky. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Let your shoulders relax, let your jaw loosen, and allow your breath to move at its own peaceful rhythm. If you enjoy these stories, and you'd like to return for more evenings of calm, you're warmly invited to subscribe to Whispers of the Night. It helps this space grow, and it ensures these quiet moments will always be waiting for you. There's nothing you need to do now, nothing to remember. Just listen and let the night carry you gently forward. Now, take a slow breath in through your nose and release it softly through your mouth. Again, breathing in and letting go. With each breath, imagine the day loosening its grip. Thoughts may still drift by, but you don't need to follow them. Let them pass like distant clouds, quiet and unimportant. Bring your attention gently to your body. Notice the weight of your head, supported and safe. Notice your shoulders sinking just a little lower, your arms resting without effort. With every exhale, allow tension to melt downward, flowing away from your chest, your back. If your mind wanders, that's perfectly okay. Simply return to the sound of this voice, steady and unhurried. You are not falling asleep yet. You are arriving in stillness, arriving in rest, and when you're ready, the story will begin, softly, gently, like a whisper meant only for you. The whispering gallery of future echoes. The door that hummed softly. Late evening settled over the old city like a patient breath, unhurried and kind. The last daylight had thinned into a pale ribbon along the rooftops, and the streets below grew quiet, their sounds folding inward as if preparing for sleep. Avelyn walked without urgency, her steps measured, her thoughts loose and unanchored. She had not planned to wander this far, yet the city had a way of gently redirecting those who listened. Stone arches leaned together above her path, and narrow alleys opened and closed like slow blinking eyes. The air carried a faint coolness, touched with the memory of warmth, and somewhere beneath it all, a subtle vibration seemed to hum. She noticed it first as a feeling rather than a sound, an almost there resonance that brushed against her awareness and retreated. It was not loud enough to disturb the calm, not sharp enough to demand attention. It felt old and patient and strangely welcoming. Avelyn paused, listening not with her ears alone, but with a quiet openness she had learned over time. The hum lingered, steady and soft, like a distant chord held without strain. A narrow passage revealed itself beside a weathered wall, partially hidden by shadow. It looked ordinary at first, easily missed by those moving with purpose. yet something about it felt expectant, as though it had been waiting for a certain moment or a certain kind of step. The stone surrounding the opening was smoother than the rest, worn not by hands but by time itself, polished into gentler lines. Faint light spilled from within, not bright enough to illuminate fully, but enough to suggest depth and continuation. Avelyn approached without fear. Curiosity rose in her gently, like a tide that did not rush. She rested her palm briefly against the cool stone, feeling the hum deepen, as if acknowledging her presence. It did not quicken, it did not retreat, it simply remained steady and calm, inviting without insistence. The corridor beyond descended gradually, its floor sloping so subtly that the change felt natural, almost comforting. Floating lanterns hovered at intervals along the walls, their glow warm and diffuse, casting soft halos that overlapped and blended. The light did not flicker, it breathed. Shadows rounded themselves at the edges, losing any sharpness, and the stone walls seemed to curve inward slightly, not confining but sheltering. As Avelyn stepped inside, the sounds of the city behind her thinned and faded, dissolving into the hum that filled the space. Her footsteps echoed, but not in the way she expected. Each sound lingered longer than it should have, stretching into a gentle afterimage that followed her for a few heartbeats before melting back into silence. The echoes did not feel empty, they felt held. She slowed her pace, allowing her steps to fall more softly. The corridor responded in kind, the echoes smoothing themselves, as if learning her rhythm. The walls bore faint patterns, lines etched so lightly they seemed drawn by breath rather than tool. They flowed without direction, looping and drifting like traces of sound made visible. When Avelyn passed close, the hum warmed, becoming almost melodic. Though no clear note could be named, there was a sense here of listening, not observation, not judgment, but a deep and attentive presence. The corridor did not demand that she understand it. It did not offer answers or warnings. It simply received her, step by step, echo by echo, as though her movement was part of something already unfolding. Time felt different beneath the city. It did not slow so much as soften. Moments rounded at the edges, losing their urgency. Avelyn found herself breathing more deeply without effort, her shoulders easing, her thoughts settling like silt in clear water. The hum remained constant, neither growing nor fading, and in its stead, a quiet reassurance took root. Whatever lay ahead did not require haste as she continued. The lantern glow shifted subtly, warming in color, then cooling again, like a long exhale followed by a patient inhale. The air carried a faint scent of stone after rain, though no moisture touched the walls. Her footsteps continued to echo, but now the sound felt familiar, almost companionable, as if each step were being gently acknowledged before being released. Avelyn reached a point where the corridor widened slightly, enough to suggest a pause rather than a destination. She stopped, standing still, and the echoes of her last step unfurled slowly around her, threading themselves through the hum before fading. In the silence that followed, she realized the quiet was not empty. It was full in a way that left room for rest. She placed her hand against the wall again, fingers brushing the etched lines. The stone was cool, yet not cold. Beneath her touch, the hum deepened just enough to be felt in her chest. a soft vibration that aligned with her breathing. It reminded her of distant singing carried through walls, heard only when the house was asleep and the listener was willing to stay still. There was no sense of danger here, number tightening in her chest, no instinct urging retreat. Instead, a calm curiosity guided her forward. It felt as though the corridor recognized not her name or her past, but her willingness to listen without demanding meaning. The thought settled easily within her, unchallenged, as she resumed walking. The echoes responded again, each step creating a gentle ripple in the air. The lanterns drifted slightly as she passed, not moving away, not drawing closer, simply adjusting, as if maintaining a comfortable distance. The walls curved with the passage, guiding her without signs or directions, their smoothness suggesting that many had passed before, and many would pass again. The hum shifted once more, barely perceptible, like a change in weather sensed before it is seen. It did not grow louder, but richer, layered with something that felt like memory without image. Avelyn did not try to name it. She allowed it to exist as it was, trusting that understanding was not required for acceptance. She wondered briefly how long she had been walking, then let the question drift away. Time here did not need to be measured. The corridor unfolded at its own pace, and she matched it naturally, her steps light, her presence unburdened. The city above felt distant now, not lost, simply resting at a gentle bend in the passage. She paused again, drawn by a subtle change in the air. The hum softened, thinning just enough to make room for something else, a hint of warmth, a promise of depth beyond what she could see. The lanterns ahead glowed a shade brighter, their light pooling like honey on stone. Avelyn stood at the threshold of whatever came next, not with anticipation, but with trust. The corridor had not hurried her, had not startled or tested her. It had welcomed her quietly, step by step, echo by echo, and in doing so, had taught her something simple and profound, that some paths reveal themselves only to those willing to move gently, and some doors open not with force, but with listening. She took one more step forward, and the echo followed, lingering softly behind her, as if the corridor itself wished her well. The gallery of listening walls. The corridor opened without ceremony, widening so gradually that Avelyn did not notice the change at first. The walls eased away from one another, the ceiling lifting higher, the air growing cooler and more spacious. The hum that had guided her steps softened as she crossed the threshold, thinning into a quieter resonance that felt less like sound and more like presence. When she finally stopped walking, it was not because she had reached an end, but because the space itself seemed to ask for stillness. She stood within a vast circular chamber, its shape revealed slowly as her eyes adjusted. Pale stone formed a perfect ring around her, smooth and uninterrupted, curving without corners or edges. The walls were etched with flowing lines that traced gentle paths across their surface, looping and crossing like currents in water or the faint trails left behind by drifting sound. They were shallow enough to feel beneath the fingertips, yet precise enough to suggest intention. Lantern glow rose from no visible source, bathing the chamber in a calm, even light that carried no shadows sharp enough to disturb the quiet. The chamber felt immense, yet not overwhelming. Its size did not press upon her, nor did it invite movement. Instead, it held her where she stood, as though the act of arrival was enough. Avelyn remained still, her breath steady, her arms resting naturally at her sides. The silence deepened around her, settling into something dense and attentive. At first, there was nothing more than the echo of her own presence, her breath, the faint sound of fabric shifting as she exhaled. Then, slowly, something else emerged. It did not announce itself. It arrived the way awareness does, gentle and unforced. A whisper brushed the edge of hearing, so faint it might have been imagined. Avelyn did not turn her head. She did not strain to listen. She allowed the sound to exist without pursuit. Another whisper followed, then another, each one distinct yet impossibly soft. They did not come from a single direction. They seemed to rise from the walls themselves, from the etched lines that now appeared to glow just slightly brighter. The sounds carried no urgency. They did not form words she could grasp. They felt like impressions rather than messages, like the emotional residue of moments not yet lived. A ripple of warmth passed through the chamber, subtle but unmistakable. Avelyn felt it in her chest first, a quiet expansion that did not demand attention. The whispers layered gently atop one another, never overlapping enough to confuse. There was the distant suggestion of laughter, light and brief, gone before it could fully form. There were footsteps, not loud or hurried, but calm and unburdened, echoing as if across a familiar floor. There were voices, low and kind, their meaning carried not by language, but by tone alone. Avelyn realized, without surprise, that these sounds did not belong to the past. They carried no weight of memory, no sharpness of regret. They felt unclaimed, waiting not to be seized, but to be acknowledged. They were possibilities, not predictions, futures, not fixed, but gently outlined in sound. She remained where she was, letting the whispers move around her. The chamber responded to her stillness, the etched lines along the walls shimmering softly, as if breathing in time with her. The light warmed further, taking on a faint pearlescent quality that softened the space even more. The gallery felt alive in a quiet way, not animated by motion, but by attention. As the whispers continued, Avelyn noticed something else. None of them demanded understanding. They did not form stories or images in her mind. They did not present scenes or outcomes. Instead, they carried feelings, ease, resilience, calm, joy, patience. The sounds passed through her awareness and settled somewhere deeper, where interpretation was unnecessary. She thought, briefly, of how often the future was imagined as something to be seen, mapped, or controlled. Visions, signs, symbols. Yet here, the future arrived as sound, ephemeral and ungraspable. It could not be held or examined. It could only be felt, and even then, only lightly. The whispers shifted, becoming more diffuse, spreading evenly through the chamber. Avelyn felt surrounded, not enclosed, but embraced. She closed her eyes without conscious decision, allowing the darkness behind her lids to blend with the gentle glow of the space. The absence of sight made the sounds feel closer, more intimate, though still impossibly soft. A sense of awe settled over her, not the kind that startles or overwhelms, but the kind that quiets the heart. The chamber was vast, yet it did not make her feel small. Instead, it made her feel appropriately placed, as though she occupied exactly the amount of space she was meant to. Nothing here compared her to what might come. Nothing measured her against what had not yet happened. The whispers began to thin, leaving longer spaces of silence between them. Each pause felt intentional, as meaningful as the sounds themselves. Avelyn noticed that the silence did not feel empty. It felt expectant, but without impatience. It reminded her of the quiet moments just before sleep, when thoughts drift without direction and the body begins to let go. She opened her eyes again and studied the walls more closely. The etched lines now seemed less like markings and more like traces of movement, as if sound itself had brushed against the stone and left behind a memory of its passing. When she stepped closer, the whispers adjusted, not growing louder, but aligning themselves with her presence. The chamber listened as much as it spoke. Avelyn lifted her hand and placed her fingertips against the wall. The stone was smooth, warm to the touch. Beneath her skin, she felt a faint vibration, steady and calm. The whispers softened further, as if acknowledging the contact. She did not feel as though she were being shown something. She felt as though she were being reminded. The realization came quietly. This gallery did not exist to reveal the future. It existed to teach how to listen to it, not with urgency, not with fear, but with openness and restraint. The future, it seemed, did not need to be known in detail to be trusted. A gentle sense of discovery unfolded within her. Not discovery of information, but of understanding without words. The whispers did not tell her what would happen. They showed her how it might feel to arrive there. They offered no guarantees, only reassurance that whatever came would carry room for breath. As she stood there, the chamber continued its patient listening. The light shifted almost imperceptibly, growing slightly dimmer, then steadying again. The etched lines along the walls seemed to settle, their glow receding to a quiet sheen. The whispers returned one last time, softer than before, barely present, like echoes remembered rather than heard. Avelyn felt no desire to reach for them. She allowed them to pass, trusting that what mattered would remain without effort. The sounds faded naturally, not cut short, but gently completed, like a song ending on a note that did not need resolution. The chamber returned to near silence. Avelyn remained still, feeling the fullness of the quiet wrap around her. The all lingered, calm and steady, accompanied by a sense of quiet discovery that did not seek to be explained. She understood now that some knowledge arrived not to be carried forward, but to be felt in the moment and released. When she finally shifted her weight, preparing to move on, the chamber did not resist. The walls remained smooth and pale, the etched lines resting in stillness. The gallery had spoken, and now it listened again, holding its silence with the same care it had given its whispers. Avelyn took a slow breath, and with it, the last traces of sound settled gently within her, not as memories to recall, but as calm to carry. Echoes of Tomorrow's Heart. The passage leading away from the gallery narrowed so gently that Avelyn felt the change before she fully saw it. The wide openness behind her softened into something closer, more intimate, as though the space itself wished to walk beside her rather than surround her. The walls drew nearer, their pale stone warmed by a subtle shift in light, and the air seemed to carry a tenderness she could feel against her skin. The echoes of the gallery faded behind her, replaced by a quieter, closer presence that felt less like a place and more like a companion. Her steps slowed without conscious thought. Here, each footfall felt cushioned, as if the floor absorbed sound. Before returning, it softened and reshaped. The whispers returned, but they were different now. They did not drift from all directions. They seemed to follow her, staying just close enough to be felt without pressing in. The hum that had once guided her forward now felt warmer, layered with something unmistakably gentle. Avelyn breathed in, and the hall seemed to breathe with her. The walls curved slightly inward, their etched lines less elaborate than those in the gallery, yet deeper, as if carved by repeated touch rather than careful design. Lantern light flowed along their surface in slow gradients, amber blending into soft rose, then settling into a steady glow that felt reassuring rather than illuminating. The first echo reached her like a familiar memory she had not yet lived. It carried the quiet ease of an early morning, the kind where light filters through a window without urgency. She felt the calm of waking without alarm, of stretching into the day rather than being pulled into it. There was no image attached, no scene to grasp, only the feeling of gentleness, of time allowing itself to unfold. She continued walking, her posture loosening, her shoulders easing further with each step. Another echo brushed past her awareness, warmer still. It carried the tone of a calm conversation, voices low and unhurried, pauses filled not with discomfort but with understanding. The sound did not form words, yet its meaning settled clearly within her. It spoke of being heard without needing to explain, of presence shared without effort. Avelyn's hand drifted closer to the wall as she walked, her fingers hovering just above the stone. She did not touch it yet. The echoes seemed to respond to her nearness, growing slightly richer, as if encouraged by her openness. There was laughter, soft and brief, the kind that rises naturally and fades without echoing too long. It carried no sharp edges, no surprise, only ease. The hall felt alive in a quieter way than the gallery. It did not overwhelm with scale or mystery. Instead, it wrapped itself around her like a familiar path, one walked many times in dreams. The light gathered closer to her now, warming the folds of her clothing, tracing soft highlights along her hair. She felt seen without being observed. Another echo arrived, slower this time, deeper. It held the weight of resilience, not dramatic, not hard-earned through struggle, but steady and patient. It was the sound of standing again after resting, of continuing without force. Avelyn felt it settle in her chest, anchoring her in a calm certainty that did not need explanation. She paused mid-step, not because the hall asked her to stop, but because the moment felt complete enough to rest within. Her breath slowed further, her awareness widening to include the subtle details she might otherwise have missed. The way the light pulsed almost imperceptibly, the way the air carried warmth without heaviness, the way the echoes never lingered too long, never asked her to hold on to them. As she stood there, The whispers gathered briefly, not growing louder but closer, like a gentle chorus humming without words. They felt personal now, unmistakably tied to her own path, yet free of demand. These were not promises. They were reminders that small joys mattered, that calm moments were not interruptions, but destinations in themselves. Avelyn realized she felt no fear at all, not of what lay ahead, not of what these echoes might imply. The future, here, did not feel like a weight pulling her forward. It felt like a hand resting lightly at her back, guiding without pressure. She resumed walking, her fingertips now brushing the stone wall. The surface was warm, smoother than before, as if worn by countless similar gestures. Beneath her touch, the echoes softened further, aligning themselves with her pace. The hall seemed to learn her rhythm, or perhaps she was learning its. Another echo arrived, quieter than the rest, almost hidden within the hum. It carried the feeling of rest at the end of a long day, of sitting without needing to fill the silence, of letting the body unwind without guilt. It reminded her that resilience did not always mean endurance. Sometimes it meant allowing oneself to pause. The warmth in the hall deepened, not in color but in presence. The light no longer felt like something separate from the space. It felt woven into it, as natural as breath. Avelyn's steps grew lighter, not hurried, simply unburdened. The echoes continued to come and go, each one distinct, none demanding to be remembered. She noticed that time here did not move in a straight line. Moments overlapped gently, like ripples smoothing themselves before reaching the shore. The future did not stand ahead of her like a destination. It walked beside her, quiet and patient. Another whisper brushed past, carrying the tone of a peaceful morning routine, the clink of something set down carefully, the soft exhale of contentment, the stillness that follows a task done without rush. It felt ordinary, and in that ordinariness, profoundly comforting. Avelyn smiled faintly, without realizing it. The hall responded, the light warming just enough to notice. She felt as though she were being reminded of something she had always known but often forgotten, that a kind future was built from moments just like these, small and gentle, layered quietly over time. The echoes began to thin as she walked, spacing themselves farther apart. Each one arrived, lingered briefly, then faded without resistance. She did not reach for them. She let them pass, trusting that what mattered would remain without effort. The hall grew slightly narrower, again, the walls drawing closer, not to confine, but to hold. The warmth remained, steady and reassuring. The hum softened into something barely perceptible, like the memory of sound rather than sound itself. Avelyn felt a deep sense of comfort settle within her, heavier than emotion, yet lighter than thought. It rested somewhere between breath and heartbeat, a quiet assurance that did not require words. The future, she understood now, was not something to brace for. It was something to meet gently, step by step. She slowed once more, allowing the last few echoes to pass. One carried the feeling of patience, another of quiet confidence, another of acceptance. None stayed long enough to be named. They were not meant to be collected. As the hall began to open slightly ahead, the echoes faded almost entirely, leaving behind a silence that felt warm rather than empty. Avelyn took a slow breath, feeling the comfort settle fully within her. Whatever came next would come in its own time, and she would meet it as she had met this place without resistance. She continued forward, carrying with her not visions or promises, but something far more enduring, the understanding that time could be kind, and that listening was often enough. The keeper of the unheard. The narrow hall released Avelyn into a space that felt like a pause made visible. The walls eased outward and then curved inward again, forming a small alcove that seemed set apart from the flow of passage and echo. Light gathered here more gently than anywhere before, soft and diffuse, as though it had learned how to rest. It did not shine from lanterns or etched lines. It simply existed, suspended in the air, warming the stone without casting sharp shadows. Dust motes drifted slowly through the glow, moving in no hurry, each one catching the light for a moment before floating on. Their motion felt deliberate, yet effortless, like breathing made visible. The hum that had followed Avelyn through the corridors thinned here into near silence, leaving behind a stillness that felt complete rather than empty. She stepped into the alcove and felt an immediate sense of welcome, not expressed through sound or motion, but through ease. Her body responded before her thoughts did. Her shoulders relaxed, her breath deepened, and she felt no urge to continue forward. This place did not invite movement. It invited staying. Avelyn settled herself against the curved stone wall, sitting where the floor rose slightly, shaped as if for rest. The stone was smooth and warm, holding the day's lingering calm. She rested her hands loosely in her lap and allowed her gaze to soften. The dust motes continued their slow dance, and time seemed to loosen its hold. At first, she sensed nothing else. Then, gradually, a presence made itself known, not by appearing, but by listening. It felt like attention focused gently upon her, steady and patient. There was no weight to it, no pressure. It was simply there, as natural as the light. A voice emerged, not from the air, but from the quiet itself. It did not echo. It did not interrupt. It arrived like a thought she had not finished forming. "You have come far by listening," it said, softly. The words did not startle her. They settled into her awareness with the same calm as the whispers before. Avelyn did not search for the speaker. She understood instinctively that there was nothing to see in the way she expected. The presence was more voice than form, more awareness than body. "I watch over what is not meant to remain," the voice continued, gentle and unhurried. "The echoes that pass through the gallery, and the ones that are allowed to fade." Avelyn listened without responding. The alcove felt like a place where answers were not required. The presence seemed to sense her openness and continued. "Not all futures must be known," it said. "Some are meant only to brush the heart and move on." The words resonated deeply, stirring something within her chest. She thought of the whispers she had heard, the warmth, the reassurance, the gentle reminders. None of them had asked her to hold on. None had demanded memory. "You wonder why some sounds fade," the keeper said, the voice carrying a tone of understanding rather than explanation. "It is not because they lack meaning, but because meaning can become heavy when held too tightly. The dust motes drifted closer to her line of sight, their movement slow and untroubled. Avelyn felt her hands loosen further in her lap, fingers uncurling without effort. The heart grows light when it listens without clinging, the keeper continued, when it allows what is meant to pass to do so freely. Avelyn felt the truth of this settle into her body rather than her mind. She thought of moments in her life where she had tried to hold on to certainty, two outcomes, two futures, imagined too clearly. The effort had always carried weight. Here, the absence of grasping felt like relief. The presence did not instruct her. It did not warn or guide. It simply shared, as one might share a quiet truth discovered through long patience. The gallery listens, the keeper said. It does not choose which echoes arrive. It only decides which may stay. Avelyn tilted her head slightly, her attention deepening. The idea felt gentle rather than unsettling. Some echoes are too sharp to linger, the voice continued. Some too heavy, some too bright. They pass through, so the heart may remain open. The light in the alcove seemed to warm further, deepening into a glow that felt protective. Avelyn noticed how safe she felt here, not because nothing could touch her, but because nothing demanded anything from her. She sensed that the presence had been here for a very long time, not in years or ages, but in patience. It felt woven into the space itself. And what remains? Avelyn asked softly, her voice barely above a breath. What is meant to, the keeper replied. What does not need effort to stay? The answer did not feel incomplete. It felt sufficient. Avelyn leaned back slightly against the curved wall, allowing her weight to rest fully. The dust motes continued their slow movement, and the light seemed to pulse gently, like a steady heartbeat. She felt no need to move, no need to speak further. The presence remained with her, silent now, listening as she listened. In the quiet, she became aware of the subtle sounds of her own body, the rhythm of her breath, the soft shift of fabric, the steady calm of her pulse. These too felt like echoes, present only for a moment before changing. You have listened well, the keeper said at last. Remember that listening does not always mean receiving. Avelyn understood. Listening could also mean allowing absence, allowing silence, allowing the unknown to remain unknown. Trust is not built from knowing, the voice continued gently. It is built from allowing the words settle deep within her, carrying no urgency. She felt a sense of surrender, unfold not resignation, but release. The future did not need to be gathered or arranged. It could be met as it arrived. The presence did not linger longer than necessary. It did not announce its departure. Its attention simply eased, like a hand lifting after a reassuring touch. The alcove remained unchanged, filled with light and drifting motes. Avelyn sat quietly for a while longer, absorbing the stillness. She felt lighter, as though something she had been carrying without noticing had been set down. The echoes she had heard before no longer pressed at the edges of her awareness. They rested somewhere deeper, unburdened by expectation. When she finally shifted, preparing to rise, the alcove did not resist. The light remained soft, the dust motes drifting, the stone warm beneath her fingertips. The keeper did not speak again, but Avelyn felt no sense of loss. What had been given did not need repetition. She stood slowly, her movements unhurried, and took one last look at the quiet space. The alcove felt complete, as though it would continue exactly as it was, whether she remained or left. As she stepped back toward the corridor, she carried with her a simple understanding that some echoes were meant to be heard only once, and some not at all, and that wisdom often lived in what was allowed to fade. The light followed her just to the edge of the alcove, then settled back into its resting place. The silence remained kind. Avelyn moved on, her heart softer, her trust deeper, her listening gentler than before. When the echoes grow silent, the gallery no longer felt endless. Its vastness had softened, as if the space itself were gently exhaling after a long vigil. The pale walls, once alive with layered whispers and overlapping hums, now seemed to draw inward, not shrinking, but settling like a lake after the wind has passed. The light dimmed, almost imperceptibly, fading not into darkness, but into a deeper shade of calm, a twilight that felt intentional and kind. Avelyn stood near the center of the circular chamber, her footsteps no longer creating echoes that lingered. When she shifted her weight, the sound of her movement dissolved almost as soon as it formed. The gallery was teaching her something new now, not through sound, but through its absence. The hum that had once woven through every breath of air softened, further thinning into a vibration so faint it was felt more than heard. It reminded her of the moment just before sleep, when the world does not vanish but loosens its hold, allowing the mind to drift without effort. The gallery seemed to be entering that same state, and she felt herself invited to follow. One by one, the whispers faded. There was no sudden silence, no sharp ending. Each sound departed gently, like a tide receding, without leaving a trace of urgency behind. A laugh she had never lived, but somehow recognized, slipped away first, its warmth lingering for a heartbeat before dissolving. Footsteps that once echoed with promise softened into memory and then into nothing at all. Words that had brushed past her awareness without ever demanding understanding unraveled into quiet. Avelyn did not reach for them. She felt no impulse to hold on, no ache at their leaving. Instead, she noticed something unexpected. As the whispers faded, the space within her seemed to expand. The quiet that followed was not empty. It was full, rich, layered, alive in a way sound had never quite managed to be. She breathed slowly, deeply, aware of each inhale and exhale, as if they were the only movements left in the world. Her breath became the loudest thing she could perceive, and even that felt gentle, respectful of the stillness surrounding her. With every breath, the gallery seemed to soften further, the walls glowing faintly as though responding to her calm. The quiet wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. It did not press in or demand attention. It simply existed, steady and supportive. In that silence, Avelyn became aware of her own presence in a way she rarely had before, not as a traveler moving through a place, but as someone fully arrived. She took a few slow steps forward. The floor beneath her feet felt warmer now, smoother, as though it had been waiting for this moment. Each step landed softly, not announcing itself. She realized that she was walking without expectation, no destination pulling her forward, no echo guiding her path. And yet she did not feel lost as she moved. She understood something with quiet clarity. The most important future was not hidden in the walls, nor carried in whispers waiting to be decoded. It was unfolding right now in the simple act of walking, of breathing, of being present within her own body, breath by breath, step by step. The thought did not arrive as a revelation, but as a recognition, something she had always known but had never fully trusted. The gallery had not been showing her what would happen. It had been teaching her how to move through what was happening. She paused and placed a hand lightly against the wall. The stone felt cool but welcoming, steady beneath her palm. There was no vibration now, no hum beneath the surface, just solidity. Just now, Avelyn closed her eyes in the darkness behind her lids. There were no images of the future waiting to appear. Instead, there was a deep, spacious calm. She felt the rhythm of her heart, slow and untroubled. She felt the gentle rise and fall of her chest. She felt herself standing, balanced and whole. The silence did not ask her to listen harder. It asked her to rest. When she opened her eyes again, the gallery seemed different, not because it had changed, but because she had. The pale walls were still etched with flowing lines, but they no longer shimmered with sound. They appeared at peace, their purpose fulfilled. The chamber felt like a place that had completed its work and was now content to remain quiet. Avelyn turned slowly, taking in the space one last time. There was gratitude in her gaze, though she could not have said exactly for what. For the whispers that had comforted her, for the echoes that had reassured her, for the silence that now held her more gently than any sound ever had. She noticed that even her thoughts had grown quieter. They moved lazily, like clouds drifting across a wide sky, never colliding, never demanding resolution. The urge to interpret, to plan, to prepare had softened into something simpler, trust. She understood now that silence was not an ending. It was a companion, a space where life could continue without narration. As she walked toward the far edge of the gallery, the dim light followed her just enough to keep her path visible. The chamber behind her did not darken dramatically. It simply rested, like a room left tidy and ready for its next visitor, whenever that might be. With each step, Avelyn felt lighter, not emptied, but unburdened. The future no longer felt like something approaching her from a distance. It felt like something meeting her where she already stood. She reached the passageway that would lead her onward and paused there, one hand resting against the stone arch. For a moment, she stood completely still, honoring the silence, letting it settle fully into her bones. There was no whisper urging her forward. There was no echo calling her back. And in that absence, she felt a deep, steady acceptance of herself, of time, of the gentle unfolding of days yet to come. She stepped forward. The gallery remained behind, her quiet and complete, while Avelyn continued on, carrying with her the fullness of silence, walking calmly into the present moment, exactly where her future was already waiting. Returning with a softer heart. The corridor gradually widened as Avelyn walked, its stone walls loosening their closeness as though they, too, understood that their task was complete. The faint glow that had guided her steps dimmed behind her, not extinguishing, but retreating inward, folding itself back into the hidden places beneath the city. Ahead, a cool breath of open air brushed her face, carrying with it the quiet promise of morning. She slowed without meaning to. There was no urgency now, no pull forward stronger than her own calm rhythm. Each step felt deliberate, unhurried, as if time itself had agreed to walk beside her rather than ahead of her. The corridor's floor changed subtly beneath her feet, stone worn smoother by centuries of passing lives, by countless journeys that had begun or ended in silence. As she reached the mouth of the passage, the sleeping city revealed itself. It lay before her in hushed stillness, rooftops softened by early mist, narrow streets empty and resting. Lamps still glowed faintly in alcoves and along corners, their light pale and tired, ready to give way to dawn. Above, the sky had begun its slow transformation. Deep night blue thinning into gentle gray, touched at the edges with the faintest warmth. Avelyn stepped out of the corridor and paused. The city did not stir at her arrival. No doors opened, no voices called. It was as though the world itself was holding its breath, allowing her to arrive fully before continuing. She felt no separation between herself and the quiet streets, no sense of leaving something behind. The gallery was hidden now, sealed once more beneath stone and memory, but its presence had not vanished. It had softened. She became aware of this, not through thought, but through sensation. Her shoulders rested lower than they had before. Her breathing felt deeper, easier, unburdened by the subtle tension she had never known she carried. Even the way her feet met the ground seemed gentler, as if she were no longer bracing herself against what might come next. The echoes no longer whispered. There were no future sounds brushing past her awareness, no murmurs lingering at the edge of hearing. And yet, she did not feel alone. Instead, she sensed a quiet companionship within herself, something steady and kind. The echoes had not disappeared. They had changed form. They lived now in her patience, in the way she noticed the light shifting across stone, in the calm acceptance that filled the spaces between her thoughts. She walked slowly into the city, letting the streets guide her without intention. Her steps made almost no sound. The stones beneath her feet seemed to welcome her passage, familiar and forgiving. She passed shuttered windows, ivy-covered walls, doorways holding the faint warmth of lives still asleep within as she moved. Memories of the gallery drifted through her, not sharply, not insistently, but like reflections on water. The listening walls, the gentle whispers, the silence that had felt fuller than sound. None of it pressed her to remember. It simply existed within her, woven seamlessly into the present moment. A pale band of light stretched across the horizon, widening slowly. The sky responded with soft colors, muted gold blending into cool lavender. The transition felt unhurried, as though dawn understood that awakening did not need to be abrupt. Avelyn reached a small square where a fountain stood silent, its basin reflecting the changing sky. She stopped there and rested her hands lightly against the cool stone edge. The water lay perfectly still, mirroring the quiet above. She watched as the first hint of sunlight touched its surface, breaking the reflection gently. Without violence, she smiled, not brightly, not with sudden joy, but with a quiet warmth that settled naturally across her face in that moment. She understood that she did not need to carry the future with her as a weight or a question. It would arrive as it always had, one breath at a time. The gallery had not given her answers. It had given her permission to rest within uncertainty, to trust the softness of time. A breeze moved through the square, lifting the edges of her cardigan, brushing her hair back from her face. It carried the faint scent of stone and morning air, clean and understated. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the sensation pass through her without holding on. When she opened them again, the city had begun to wake, not in motion, but in feeling. The silence shifted, no longer the deep hush of sleep, but the gentler quiet that precedes activity. Somewhere far away, a bird stirred. A window creaked open softly. Life prepared itself without urgency. Avelyn resumed walking. She did not know where she was going, and for the first time, that felt entirely acceptable. Each step felt sufficient on its own. She noticed the rhythm of her movement, the steady cadence that matched her breathing. It felt like a conversation between her body and the world, unspoken and mutual. As the light grew stronger, it revealed details she might once have overlooked: the subtle textures of stone, the way shadows softened rather than vanished, the quiet beauty of ordinary places. Nothing demanded her attention, yet everything invited it. She passed through narrow streets and wider avenues, following paths that felt familiar even if she could not recall walking them before. Perhaps she had, perhaps she hadn't. It no longer seemed important to distinguish between memory and discovery. The calm she carried did not feel fragile. It did not threaten to break if the world grew louder or more demanding. It felt rooted, anchored within her, ready to remain even as the day unfolded. She realized then that rest was not something she needed to seek. It was something she could inhabit. As the sun lifted higher, the city's colors warmed. Stone turned golden. Windows caught the light. The faint hum of distant life began to gather, still soft, still respectful of the early hour. Avelyn welcomed it without tension, without resistance. She found a quiet place near a low wall overlooking the city's edge and sat there for a while, letting the morning continue around her. She did not rush to fill the silence with thought. She let it be what it was: open, gentle, alive. The echoes lived on in this stillness, not as predictions or reminders, but as an underlying harmony, a subtle assurance that she did not need to hurry toward anything, that being present was enough. When she finally stood again, she felt ready, not in the sense of preparation, but in the sense of ease, ready to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight, ready to meet whatever came with the same softness she now carried within her. She took one last look at the sky, now fully awake, and then turned back toward the city, stepping into the day with a softer heart behind her. The corridor remained hidden, the gallery sealed in its quiet depth. Ahead of her, life waited, not loudly, not urgently, but patiently, and Avelyn walked on, calm and unafraid, carrying silence like a gift, letting it shape her presence, her patience, and her rest as the day gently began. for spending this quiet time with Whispers of the Night. May the echoes of this story stay with you as calm, not sound. If sleep has found you, rest peacefully. If you are still awake, remain gentle with yourself. Until next time, good night.